Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning from Inductive Automation, Cloud-Based SCADA Systems, the Benefits and Risks. Is moving your SCADA system to the cloud right for your company. My name is Don Pearson. I serve as Chief Strategy Officer with Inductive Automation, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator this morning. I think we have certainly a topic which is of extremely high interest, as evidenced by the number of people who wanted to attend this morning. And we will also, as we always do, make the archive available afterwards should you want to share the content with others who were unable to, attend this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Just a little bit, I'd like to give a little bit of company background in terms of just looking at setting the table a little bit. If you haven't heard of Inductive Automation, and many of you are familiar with us, the company was started in 2003. We're pioneers in the database-centric web-launched HMI and SCADA systems, and it's really proven to be very popular and applied in, as you can see, a variety of industries. Back in 2003, Steve Heckman, who is our founder and our president, has over 25 years of experience in systems integration, and he really took a look at what the lay of the land was, and he really thought there had to just be a better way to get things done in this industry. Not only in terms of the technology and shifting over and beginning to use modern technology, but also in terms of the licensing and the model by which both integrators and end users were empowered to do the things in your organization that you need to do to be innovative and competitive and successful with your customers or with your overall enterprise. Also, I just want to mention something here because it happens to be something we're very proud of that does indicate a little bit of where we're going with our technology. Basically, last month, Inductive Automation was recognized by Oracle for its innovation in using Java in the industrial software industry. And what you see here is from that Oracle conference. Two of our developers, Colby Clegg in the middle and Carl Gold on the right, went to San Francisco to accept the award. And Adam Messenger, who is the Vice President for Java SE development at Oracle, is pictured there on the left with Colby and with Carl. In a nutshell, what Ignition is, it's a web-managed platform with web-launched clients and a web-launched designer. It's also, functionality-wise, HMI, SCADA, manufacturing execution systems, MES functionality, historian functionality using any SQL database, business applications using any SQL database, recipes and batch management functionality. And those of you who are familiar with it and work with it realize you can do just about anything you want to do with it. What makes it special? One, it's sold by the server, which means a variety of things listed below: unlimited free web launch clients, unlimited free concurrent web launch designers, unlimited free data points, free database connections to any SQL database, unlimited free screens, free projects per server, free scalability, free OPC UA server and drivers. It's totally cross-platform. That means Windows 32 and 64-bit Linux OS X. So the whole idea was basically to give you an empowering tool where you could do whatever it is you wanted to do for your customers or inside your organization. And as we go to today's topic, and if you have questions in the Q&A about anything about Inductive Automation or our Ignition platform, we'll certainly answer them. But the focus today is really on the cloud and evaluating some of the risks and benefits of going to the cloud. If you haven't, you certainly have the availability to download a white paper, which is going to be the foundation for the content for today. It's my pleasure to introduce Jack Krohmer, who will be speaking a little bit later. He's president of Process Network Plus. He's worked to integrate SCADA systems with companies for numerous industries around the country. I don't know if it's okay if I say this, Jack, but I know it's approaching 4 decades, if not. So he's been doing this a very long time, and he, I think, has some very good content to offer in perspective as one evaluates the cloud and the evolution of SCADA systems, MES, HMI in the cloud. And also, Travis Cox, he's Director of Training and Support Services here at Inductive Automation. He oversees our technical support services. He's been with the company since 2004 and has been teaching all of our training courses for several years now. So what I'd like to do is really turn it over to Travis and give him an opportunity to sort of take a look at what the cloud means, how it approaches, how one approaches the cloud from a SCADA perspective, and then I'll be coming back and forth looking at some questions as we go into the risks and benefits. I also do want to say one housekeeping thing. Many of you have already noticed this, but you do have in your console a questions tab. take advantage of that questions tab because we're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A as we go through our hour this morning. So type in your questions, and if we can't type the answer, I'm going to get to as many of them as I possibly can during the Q&A section. With that, Travis, over to you.
All right, thank you, Don. Again, my name is Travis Cox, and I'm the Director of Training and Support Services here for Inductive Automation. And I'm going to take you through basically kind of introducing what the cloud is and talk about a couple different methodologies when using SCADA either on your local network or in the cloud. But first, we've heard a lot about what web-based is. Web-based, Ignition's web-based, and you hear that term thrown around a lot. So really, what does web-based mean? Well, a web-based application is one that uses standard TCP/IP communication that's accessed over a local network or internet or the internet, and that typically uses HTTP or HTTPS to communicate to that application. So Ignition, at its core, is web-based. So it's a web-based HMI SCADA MES software. And the reason how it's all possible is that Ignition is installed on a central server. So they only install Ignition on one machine. On that machine, Ignition is listening for anybody who wants to communicate to it over that standard TCP/IP protocol, which is typically HTTP or HTTPS. So if I'm a client, I can go anywhere in my network, open up my web browser, I can point it to Ignition, and I can then launch the application from that server. And it's going to download the application onto my machine, and it's still going to communicate back to that server. So you can see it's a client-server model, and that client always going to be communicating back to the server through that TCP/IP communication. So it is web-based at the core. Now what's really nice about that web-based is that it makes the client side of things very hassle-free. There's zero installation. There's nothing you have to install on those machines. I can go to any machine in my network, simply go to the web browser, point it to what we call the Ignition gateway, and I can access my project. And you're very familiar with these kind of applications all over the internet. You go to Google Docs, go to your Gmail account, or a lot of these different accounts, Amazon. You can go and log in from anywhere you're at, and you can get access to the application. And you don't have to have anything pre-installed to do so, and that's exactly what Ignition's doing by being web-based. And so we can connect to an Ignition server, and that server can be located in a variety of locations. It can be on a local network, or it can be on the internet. So we look at the architecture here. This is the standard architecture that we have with Ignition. In the middle there is our central server, where Ignition and all the modules are installed. That's going to be called the Ignition gateway. And that gateway is going to communicate to all of your PLCs through OPC, communicate to one or more SQL databases. And down the right-hand side of the screen, we have all of our clients and our designers. And they're communicating to that server using that standard TCP/IP communication. Okay. So those are web launch clients, web launch designers. It makes it very, very easy to work with the system. So really, like I said, because we're using web-based technology, Ignition can be installed and run on either a local private network server or a cloud public network server. And there are definitely some big differences between the two. And we're going to talk about those here today. So a local private network server is one that's simply on your local network, and it's very locked down. Nobody has access to it except for if you're on that network. A cloud public network server is one that's on the internet, and everybody has access to it no matter where they're at, as long as they have internet connection. So these are two pretty common approaches. And now that the cloud is becoming more popular, more people want to learn about that second approach, that cloud public network server. And here today we want to basically show you the benefits and the risks of going to the cloud. But before we do that, I really want to talk about the differences between the local private network server and the cloud server. So the local private network server is the typical installation that you have with Ignition. This is the most common, pretty much what everybody uses, where the server is located on site. You have ownership of that server, you maintain the server, your IT department is going to provide technical support for that server, but it's all within your network. So typically in a lockdown room, so that only certain people have access to the server, and basically all of your clients are going to connect to that server through your in-house local network. Those clients don't have to have internet access at all. They just simply need to be on your network, whether it be wireless or whether it be wired. You can connect to that server and access the application. Now, with this approach, the offsite clients, if you want to connect to it from home or from some other location, you have to somehow get on that network. And typically, you do that through a VPN connection, port forwarding, login, some sort of way of getting onto that local network. So it makes the system a lot more locked down. Very few people have access to the system because it's on the local network there. Again, though, it's using the same HTTP or HTTPS protocols to connect to that server. And that is where Ignition is going to be installed, basically, on that server. So this is the most common approach, the one that pretty much everybody uses from the beginning. Nowadays, we're seeing more people want to go to the cloud. And it's starting to become a huge buzzword, and a lot of people want to know more about it. And that's why we're here today to talk about it. So what is the cloud? Well, a cloud is simply a large array of remote internet-based servers. The information is accessed via internet connection, and the storage space on the cloud is rented from some cloud provider. And there are several cloud providers out there today, like Amazon, Google, and so forth. And that storage space is really scalable according to your needs. So you can actually increase the space. Some services allow you to increase the amount of CPU you have, the amount of memory you have on the fly. So it's a lot less. It's a lot easier to actually maintain because you're not in charge, or you're not taking ownership of that machine. So we look at Ignition on a cloud public network server. Here the server is located off-site in the cloud, and that's going to be managed by that cloud hosting service, that provider. And that can be a single server up there, or it can be a distributed server. You have no idea. The point here is that when you start up your machine, that machine can be running anywhere in the world. It can be running on one machine or several machines, and the idea is it's abstracted from you. You have no idea about that. That's all maintained by that hosting provider. Again, you're going to rent space from that service, and that is going to be, usually you have to pay per hour of when that machine is up. You're going to pay a price per hour. You're going to pay for data transfers back and forth between the cloud and your client machines. But the real difference here is that all of your clients now connect to the server through the internet. So rather than through the local network, your clients have to have a network connection, an internet connection. So the on-site clients need to connect to the internet, and also, of course, the off-site clients, they're going to connect to the internet. So as far as connecting to that service, that Ignition machine, it doesn't matter where you are, what kind of machine you are. It's accessed the exact same way through that cloud. But again, in order to make this possible, it still uses the HTTP or HTTPS protocols to connect to that server. So it's all the same web-based technology, but it's just kind of where that machine is actually going to be, on the local network or inside of the cloud. So hopefully you're starting to see the differences between those two approaches. Now when we look at going into the cloud, again, there's a lot of buzz about it. And the big tech giants these days, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, they're all pushing for the cloud. Apple's new iCloud, where you can store all of your files and all of your settings up in the cloud. Google has an app engine that allows you to run websites and applications up there. Amazon has what they call the EC2, which is a way for you to, it's their elastic compute cloud, where you can create instances or machines and run them on forever or just when you need them. So all of these approaches are all the cloud, and they're the hosting providers. They have server farms all throughout the world with massive arrays of servers that are going to basically run your system. And you have no idea where it's running or what it's running on, but that your machine is just simply running. And that's the idea about it. Those providers are actually going to maintain those things for you. They need to make sure that that machine, that instance is running 24/7. They're going to guarantee that it's up. Amazon, for instance, their EC2 cloud, they run their own website on that provider, on their same service. So you're going to hope that it's going to be up 24/7, because if it's down, then their website's going to be down. So a lot of these enterprise management systems are moving to the cloud as well. And even some software as a service services like are providing SCADA systems in the cloud. And we see a lot more people who want to do this. Integrators who want to move and have central server up there where they can connect up to their customers' PLCs and provide a client that their customers can go and connect to. It's becoming more popular. But when we talk about that cloud, and when we go up in the cloud, we have to look at the benefits and the risks of that cloud. So let's first talk about some of the benefits of using the cloud. Really, the first benefit is that you only have to pay for what you use. So you only have to rent the cloud storage space that you need. And like I said, it can be space, it can be memory, or it can be CPU, depending on your provider. So you can actually increase or decrease what you use on the fly. It's very dynamic, and that's what's really nice about it. So you don't have to pay for exactly what you use. That space is going to grow with you. So as your company grows, you can pay for more cloud storage space, or if you needed to decrease it for whatever reason, you could decrease it. You're in control of that machine up there. That's really going to save you on IT costs, because those IT department doesn't have to maintain any hardware. There's nothing they have to do if anything fails, any motherboards fail or hard drives fail. Nothing. There's no worry about that. It's because that service is just in the cloud, and all you have to do is maintain and make sure that machine is running in the cloud. And those providers, they provide tools for you to see how your machine's running, look at the statistics, and see your CPU, your memory usage, and you can really get an idea of how things running in the cloud. But again, you only need one IT person to do that, so you can save a lot of money on IT costs. Especially if you have a $3,000 server and that server crashes, you have to go buy another one. You don't have to do that up in the cloud. There's no worries. There are some more benefits here of using the cloud. It's very easy to access your data. The information in the cloud can be accessed anywhere through the internet. So if I'm on vacation, I can look at the application. If I'm at home, I can look at it. If I'm at work, no matter where you are, you can get access to that project. And it's really much easier to access it on an iPhone or an Android phone or iPad or some of these new tablets that are out there. It can be accessed on PCs as well as those devices because it's just in the internet, and these are all internet-ready devices. So it makes access to the data much, much easier. It also improves collaboration because you can have multiple people in different locations throughout the world that can collaborate through the cloud. So if it's an Ignition server that's up there in the cloud, well, you can have multiple people on the same designer at the same time, and they didn't have to have a VPN connection or any sort of special routing to get to that server because it's just simply up in the cloud. And lastly, it's really easy to scale. These cloud-based systems are easy to expand in size. Like we were talking about with the space and the memory and CPU, it really can scale up nicely. Ignition scales up nicely because of the licensing and the benefits that you have at Ignition, that unlimited tags, clients, screens. So you just pay one single price for your server, and you can scale up. Well, if you install that Ignition on a laptop machine, well, you can only scale up to that hardware. So if you would put Ignition on a cloud-based machine, that you can easily change the size and change the amount of memory and CPU that you have, well, now you're increasing it on both fronts, the software and the hardware. So throughout, as your company grows, you can increase both of those at the same time, and that can really save you a lot of time and money in regards to that machine. So when we talk about SCADA systems that are in the cloud, what you're really doing is you're putting that application up in the cloud server. So you're installing Ignition rather than on a local network server, you're installing on a cloud public server. So that you're going to install the SCADA application, probably a database, and on the same machine that's up there. Now, what you're going to be doing when you install that application in the cloud is you're going to be connecting to your PLCs throughout various locations throughout the world. So whether that be through a VPN connection or you put your PLC on the internet, which probably isn't recommended, but there's different ways you can connect to that PLC. So you're going to send and receive information from that cloud server to that PLC. And then the clients, of course, are going to be connected to that server through the internet, and it's going to be looking at the real-time status control values, historical values, all the same stuff, but it's going to be going through the cloud. And if it's looking at a PLC value, well, you're going to basically get the PLC value from the SCADA server, which is communicated to the PLC. So everything's going back and forth through that cloud, through the internet. So with this, you can imagine there's a lot of risks that can be involved. There's a lot of risks that can be involved when you're sending and receiving data from both the clients and the PLC in the cloud. So as this is a very exciting topic and people who want to move to the cloud, we should really sit back and look at some of these risks in a lot more detail. And so to go over the risks, I'm going to turn the webinar back over to Don, and we're going to look at those risks in more detail and ask some very specific questions about what you can do to guarantee that your system is going to be secure in the cloud.
Travis, thanks. Much appreciated. I think we'll have a chance to get into some questions here from both Jack and for Travis as we look at the risks. I just want to also recommend that even after today's webinar, that you do take the time to read the white paper, which is put together here, because it deals in much more detail in some of this area. But I think it's an area here where a lot of question and answers. I can see we're already getting a fair number here that we'll get to allow us to sort of dig into what you really want to know. Three major areas that I would say are the major areas of risk: security, performance, reliability. And there's, while a lot of buzz, of course, as Travis mentioned about the cloud and its potential for enterprise systems, I think it's important not to get really caught in the hype. So when you're looking at it, you're making a good informed choice about how to use the cloud for your business and what makes sense to be on the cloud and what does not make sense to be on the cloud. And that's the serious risk to consider, and especially when you look at it as relates to HMI SCADA systems. So some of the risks you have to know are these, and we're going to dig into them in a little bit more detail. You can look at the first one, security. Secure information sent through public networks. So information in the cloud can be accessed anywhere through the internet, as Travis said. Also, though, you have to look at it as a target for hackers, because cloud services are big targets for hackers because of the variety and the amount of information stored on them. I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at this. It just came out on November 20th, a post from Fred Post, and the title says, "Hacker says Texas town used 3-character password to secure internet-facing SCADA systems." And this email from this hacker says he credits creating a remote compromise of supervisory control and data acquisition SCADA systems used by South Houston, a community in Harris County, Texas, communicating from an email address tied to a Romanian domain. The hacker told Fred Post they discovered the vulnerable system using a scanner that looks for online fingerprints of SCADA systems. So I just, you can read that whole post if you want to. I just wanted to share it to point out on this particular bullet point that cloud services are targets for hackers. So you really need to be aware of that as a risk. Also, a big brother view. The government can access information stored online without a search warrant. So if you, let's take and break into this a little bit, and let me ask a couple questions. Jack, I'm going to ask a couple to you in your experience, and then back to Travis also, just to dig in a little bit more to this security area. So, Jack, first off, if there's an accidental information leak, what type of repercussions will your company suffer, or one of your customers' companies suffer because of that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think in the case of a company or even us connected to one of our customers, you've got to worry about, I would say, competitive risks, is that your competitors could find out a lot about your production and how you do it, and that would be damaging. I think that it also your customers could find out a lot of information that generally we don't like them to have, that lets our secrets and lets us get paid for the services we perform. So I think that it's just that kind of risk. I think the big brother item has bothered me the most lately is the fact that they're allowed to go into online information without a search warrant, and you don't have to be told that they did it. So that one bothers me.
Great, Jack. Thanks. Comment a little bit further, though. So then, that being said, what kind of information is safe to put on the cloud, just from your perspective?
I think that anything you'd like to share with your customers and your competitors and the government, and there's a lot of that is just, I could care less if they're looking at it, but it might be interesting to them from, personal edification and just understanding how the system works and what's available. So it's, there's a lot of it. And from my experience working with a whole bunch of companies that compete with each other, in general, when they see how you're doing it, they say, no way, we wouldn't do it that way. So, I think it's, financial information, personnel information that could be, on the system and available is you just got to protect it. But if you put it on the cloud, it's available, whether you think so or not.
Thanks, Jack. So, Travis, on that last point, if someone did gain access to your sensitive information, would you even know?
A lot of times you wouldn't know. That's the scary thing about it. When you have a cloud system, there are a lot of security things you have to think about. If you're encrypting your data, if there's a firewall that's set up appropriately, if you write username and passwords, your passwords are something that's harder than a password, or or some of the major 4 passwords that are so easy that anybody can get access to. So a lot of times you won't know unless you put some things up there that allow you to audit or track what's going on. And let's say you're using Ignition, for example, you can turn on auditing and see when people log in, when they make changes. And you can do the same thing with machines. You can really put a lot more emphasis on security, but you have to set it up. It's not there by default. So if you didn't know that somebody's accessing your data, well, you're going to be at some sort of a loss, because that's a lot of times how these hackers, they get in. They can see how and change up your system because they're in and you have no idea. So security is one big thing to think about when you're putting it up in the cloud. Now, I do want to mention that we've heard a few times, and Don here talked about today, that there's been some recent attacks against HMIs, especially ones that are exposed on the internet. And these vulnerabilities, they're there. They can be there with different packages. We've seen vulnerabilities with Microsoft and Internet Explorer. We've seen vulnerabilities with having really simple passwords. So really, it's going to be up to you to decide the level of security that you want. And depending on what kind of data you put up in the cloud, like Jack was talking about, you don't want to put up some information that's going to be used against some of your competitors, and that can make them run just as well as you are. You want to be very cautious about what you put up in the cloud, and also be cautious about how you lock it down. Now, to mention, we have Inductive Automation has put up in the Amazon EC2 cloud, we have our public demo server of Ignition up in that cloud. Now, it's not secured in any way, just the machine that's running up there has a public static IP address, and anybody can access it from throughout the world. And they can launch a client, and they can see the product that's up there. Now, the data that we have up there, we don't care about at all. That if people put their own information in there, if they access the database, it's not a big deal to us. There's no threat on us. So that's why that machine is not locked down. It's not SSL secured, or doesn't have very secure passwords, admin passwords that you wanted to get in. But just because it's a demo server. Now, if this was your own server, you're going to want to think more about security. You think about locking it down with HTTPS, SSL. Think about having really secure, strong passwords like you would if you were logging into your bank. These are really important things to look at.
Thanks, Travis. I definitely appreciate that. And also, let me just say that I'm just counterweight that with just a couple of comments on how using a local private network measure up against the cloud. Both Jack and Travis are talking about it really depends on what information you're talking about and what level of security do you want on that information, because there just are a different level and higher risks. If you look at a local private network, it's more secure information because it's access to a local intranet. Less of a target for hackers, keeping information within your network lowers your profile with hackers, and of course, Big Brother at least has to ask. The government has to inform you if they want access to your data. And one of you asked, can a government of different country than the one hosting the cloud access the data of a company in another country? I think it depends on the agreements between those countries. I don't have a thorough answer to that because I think it's a little bit all over the map of what's being done. One of the reasons why governments in this country do not want to have servers, even if they go to a cloud activity, they want to know the servers are in this country. And one of the reasons they want to do that is because they don't necessarily trust the administrations and political climate of all other countries as to what might they do with their data. So I think when you're looking at your company, you have to assess those same kinds of risks when it goes into the cloud. Travis?
I want to say one thing about that. I mean, if you look at Amazon, Amazon EC2, they have server farms in the U.S. and, of course, over in Europe. So you can create a machine up in an instance in either country. So you have to dig a little bit deeper with Amazon to see if the United States can get access to servers that are over in Europe and vice versa. There might be some sort of agreement that because it's Amazon that they probably can do that. So it's something to think about. But I know definitely in the United States, if you have information on the cloud, like Amazon services, the government can come in, they can, without a search warrant, they can go and access the information from Amazon. They have to give it to them.
Good, thanks. Take a look at performance here. Next risk, bandwidth overload, bandwidth problems with your ISP that can affect access to the cloud. Latency issues is the delay in response time and operator, the time an operator experiences working on a network. That's basically what we're talking about with latency. We're going to dig a little bit more into some examples of latency. Inconsistent performance. Latency problems can result in inconsistent reaction times with local HMI screens. That really can be confusing and frustrating to the HMI operators. So, Travis, give us a little bit bigger definition of latency and how that impacts. Well, we can go into the cloud part, but just define latency better first.
Sure, yeah. Well, latency is really a synonym for delay. So when you're looking at latency, you're thinking about delays. And we pretty much assume that there's no delays ever when we're talking about a web-based application. We expect that we go to our browser that we can pull up something extremely fast. That's just the way we think about it. However, latency really is, in taking consideration the fact that we think it should be exact, fast response times, it's the amount of time it takes to transfer data from one designated point to another. So if it takes a lot longer to get your data, well then your delay is going to be much bigger, and that can cause a lot of headaches, especially with operators if they have to wait a really long time in order to see their data or to see that maybe they wrote to a value to the PLC or whatever it may be, and that's what we're dealing with latency here.
Good, thanks. Appreciate that. So Jack, talking about latency and performance fluctuations, how will latency and latency variability affect your company or one of your customers that you're working with and their operations?
Well, I think we have to split it into critical control. If you're controlling a process, a power plant, a cement plant, a chemical plant, a food preparation plant or a drug plant, the response times we always want are instant. And my experience is that you get above a couple seconds for an operator and they're not happy. When they punch a button, they want to see a response and the feedback immediately, and so do I. So if you're doing critical control, I just can't, you probably can do it over the, in the cloud, but I don't think it would be recommended because you would lose control or the ability to control if you lose your web connection or your internet connection. But for providing information, and saving information and displaying it throughout the companies and allowing reporting and stuff, you know, a delay of seconds is really not going to cause much trouble, in my opinion. So it's the place to be careful is on critical control.
So the bottom line is, if it's something that's extremely critical, where you just can't tolerate latency, and you certainly don't want it out of your control, then that doesn't fit as well in a cloud setting as other kinds of data that you don't have the latency concern with. You know, and it might not matter in some systems so much. So, Travis, do you think when you look at that latency, or go ahead, Jack, you were going to comment on that too.
No, let Travis go.
Okay, cool. Anything in terms of you know, the monitoring reporting, maybe no problem. If it's in the cloud, not worried about latency. Can you give sort of your comment on how much latency is acceptable? Again, sort of what Jack said about the kinds of activities where it makes sense or doesn't make sense to tolerate latency?
Yeah, I mean, latency is going to be an issue that you have to run into, and it really depends on what kind of data you're bringing back. You know, if it's some simple reporting data or simple trending data, that's there's not that much of it. Let's say, it may not take very long to come back. And also, it's very dependent on the internet connection that you have. You know, if it's a dial-up connection versus an IT1 connection or something like that.
Big
well,
difference.
there's going to be a big difference in latency just because of how much you can actually push through the wire. So there are a lot of variabilities with latency, or with this issue, and you got to just think about all the different things and really just try it out and see what what kind of response times you get. With Ignition, a lot of that it can be pretty simple and really low throughput that goes between the client and the server, so you don't have a whole lot of latency. But as network load goes up and as internet connection slows down, all these different factors come into play when it can increase it.
Sure. Thanks, Travis. Did another comparison here to local private network and measuring up against the cloud on the issue of performance. Well, certainly less bandwidth is used. Bandwidth for a web-based system is less reliant on outside vendors, number one. Latency, typically there will be less latency in an internal network. As Jack said, you want to control it. So at least you're in control of it and can make adjustments that you know what you're doing. And more consistent performance, less latency means more consistent action times for those local HMI screens. Moving on to a look at reliability, the third major risk, connection failures. Your connection is dependent upon the reliability of your ISP. No direct access. If problems occur, you have no direct access to the cloud services network to resolve issues quickly. And data backup. Data backups are dependent upon your cloud service. You have no control over where it's stored and how long it's kept. So with those things, let's dig into a couple of those and as questions I'd like Jack and Travis to comment on. If you take a look at reliability and the system goes down for a few minutes or it goes down for a few hours, Jack, how would that affect you or one of your customers in their operations?
Well, if they're doing control, it means they've got to come up with another way to a backup plan for how to operate their system. If you're storing, if you have a store and forward system, that you've built between the cloud and the local connection, you're not going to lose data. But, that's a, I'm sorry, my computer screen just shut down, so I couldn't see. The inability, so it's really how you set it up, because I want to make sure that I'm not coming across negative, because I'm so excited about this possibility and what it can mean for our customers. And there's a learning curve, and there's a performance is going to just get better and better from our experience. So I'm already trying to do this stuff, but I know the risks, and that's what you've got to ascertain. You just can't go blindly into this.
Jack, I totally got that, and I don't see you as being negative. I think what we're hoping to do here today is we want to make some informed consumers. I mean, those that are listening into the webinar need to look at what makes sense to migrate to the cloud? What makes sense for a migration path and timing? How do you measure whether you're getting what you want out of that or not? And what things make sense to just stay on a local private network that you can control? So I think judgment is going to be necessary here, and someone, the level of experience you've got, has had to make those judgment calls with your customers all along. The cloud is very exciting. It's just a matter of trying to push through the buzz to the pragmatic side of it, of how you actually approach it with regard to you and your customers. So I think we're just trying to sort of look at two sides of this now, and
Sure.
see what the liabilities and risks are. So Travis, if you look at your if the system goes down, you end up losing important data. What's the impact if the system goes down? Will you lose important data?
Yeah, I mean, you can. We take you two approaches. You have the local private network server and the cloud-based internet server. Well, here on the local network, you're pretty close to the PLC. You're right there. So if you lose communication to your internet, it's not a big deal because you can still communicate with the PLC and get that data. When you go to the cloud, if you're communicating to a PLC up there, you're dependent on some sort of VPN connection or some sort of port forwarding or some sort of connection to that PLC. And that's usually going to be through the internet. And if you lose that connection, well, that server can no longer communicate to that PLC, so you're inevitably going to lose data because that link was severed. And it's something that can happen. So you really got to look at the architectures and look at how things are communicating to understand which type of system you want to go with.
Great, thanks, Travis. So we take a look at this in terms of a comparison. Again, looking at the local private network and how it measures up against the cloud. I mean, Travis is on, but there's less points of connection failure. Internet and internal networks are less affected by ISP connection failures. You have direct access to information network. If problems do occur, you can directly resolve those issues when they arise. And in terms of data backups, your data backups can be directly managed and tracked internally. So I think what we wanted to do was just kind of look at those overall three major risks. And a good number of you have a number of questions here. So I'm going to grab them, not necessarily in any order, and also say to you that you can continue to type in questions because we're going to take the last 10 to 15 minutes here and address as many of your questions as we possibly can. So Travis and Jack, I'm not taking any orders. So I'll just, and you can bounce back and forth. So Travis, you may want to comment on this a little bit more. Just what about loss of information from PLCs, for example? Vladimir has that question. You made some comment on that. Anything further on that?
Well, I mean, what about loss for PLCs? Like I said, if it's not a concern to you about losing data, if you lose communication to a PLC and you lose data for a little bit of time, if it's not such a big concern to you, then don't worry about it. But if it's data where it's regulation data, especially for like water companies or for food and beverage especially, or you have to guarantee that your data is tracked and logged, well, this is kind of a cloud-based approach can be good for visualizing the data, but you may want to think about collecting data closer to the PLC and maybe shoving it up to the cloud rather than collecting it from the cloud. So there are different architectures you can achieve and different things you do with Ignition to really solve some of those issues.
Great, thanks. This is a general question that's been asked a couple of times. Yes, you can get the white paper. Gabi Miles is asking that. You can get it off our website and download it so you can read the full white paper that we're basing a lot of today's discussion on. Next one is again on PLCs. For PLCs to connect directly to the cloud, is there a special prerequisite to have VPN clients embedded in PLCs or special hardware to get a static IP for posting from cloud servers directly? Jack, can you give us take that question on?
Sure.
You want me to read it again?
No, I've got it.
Okay, cool.
I think that you've got a lot of mechanisms, but your PLC would be on your network, and it's whether you open that network up through a VPN and allow that PLC to be addressed. Once you've done that, it's just like being there as long as your internet connection is up. So I don't think there's any need for anything special in the PLC, except from the standpoint of security. And this is a big deal. We were involved in a seminar for Homeland Security where we talked about SCADA security, and it used to be not that big of a concern because, as Steve Heckman said, we had security through obscurity. Nobody was looking for us, so we didn't have to worry about it. But with the advent of Stuxnet Jr. and that were viruses that opened the Pandora's box to pretty much publicizing to the world that, hey, hackers, you haven't been looking at the control systems yet. You know, that's a major concern, is the security. But again, that doesn't prevent you from putting the PLC on the network easily just using a VPN. And Travis, you got any other comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there's any sort of embedded VPN or anything like that to a device, but it is quite easy to set up VPN. It's very secure, that tunnel. We recommend any of that for connecting up to PLCs on local networks, because the last thing you want to do is really expose your PLC to the internet. So what you really want to do is lock it down as much as possible. And I've seen hosted systems where they will communicate to clients' PLCs through a VPN connection to each of those sites, as if it was on that network, and they can communicate to it.
Great, thanks, Travis. Here's a performance question from Stephen Lisa, and the question is, what type of network connection is needed to connect to a SCADA server in the cloud? Broadband, T1, something else? How does network latency affect the performance? Travis, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, really, the internet connection, you don't have to have the fastest and best internet connection ever. Today's standard non-dial-up connections will work fine. Ignition has a pretty low footprint on the client. It really depends what kind of data you're bringing back. Typically, an Ignition client between like 1, 5K a second through the network, and we take care of a lot of stuff for you. If we lose communication for any reasons, the server will let you know. It'll be disconnected, or if the tag maybe go stale or something for a second, you'll have some overlays. We kind of try to help you as much as possible when things get slow. And you can also, there's some statistics that you can look at as far as with Ignition. But for the most part, just basic internet connections will work fine. But the faster the internet connection, the better it's going to perform.
Great, thanks, Travis. How about, next question here from Scott Cartwright. Would it be best to use the cloud as only a backup or mirrored database?
Yeah, certainly. That's a really good approach. Let's say that you have Ignitions throughout your different sites. You can easily push data up into a central repository or a cloud database that has some basic high-level reporting screens that people can look at. And rather than having maybe your sites are on a corporate WAN, or you want access to that system throughout the world, it's much easier to get access to it in a cloud-based system than it would with with the local having a server at one of your sites. And with the one thing about the cloud is you're guaranteed with more uptime, and you have more storage space, easier to expand onto it. So pushing more and more data up there is not really an issue. So we see a lot of companies doing that for reporting type of data, and it's become a lot more popular.
Great. Thanks. Here's a question. I guess I'll let you comment on it and let Jack comment on it. This actually connects to Ignition. You discussed latency between the Ignition server and clients, but what about latency issues between the PLC and the Ignition server? How does Ignition handle latency and jitter issues?
Well, like I said, Ignition, let's say you're just doing some basic real-time status control. If you're writing to the PLC, Ignition gives you an indication that the write is pending with a little dash line that goes around the components. So it may take a little bit longer for that write to occur, and you're just gonna be waiting for a little bit more of a feedback. But we try to help you out with that kind of stuff and how we're displaying tags with overlays, things like that. But there can be some other latency issues, and maybe Jack can talk about some of those.
Jack, I'm gonna if you can comment on that, Jack. I've got a ton of questions. I'm gonna go to another one if you're fine with that answer. You let me know.
Yeah, I was fine with that. That's good.
Okay, good. Here's another question. Robert Durham says, can you implement a hybrid where non-critical data is shared via cloud, but critical data is only available via local network? In a SCADA environment, this may be monitoring via cloud, but control only over local network or via a VPN. Jack, you want to comment on that?
Sure. I think that's the right way to do it. And Travis has already commented on some as kind of a hybrid, but I would think that control would be done through clients, even if it was on the cloud, that are local clients, that they're local to the process. And you could easily set up the login and the security in Ignition so that the people that are allowed to have control, you've already designated as local, and the rest of the people are read-only or view-only. Because the remote control, especially when you have the chance of hurting people and or equipment, is got to be local. I mean, you can't have somebody starting a process, from Timbuktu on a process in Austin, Texas. I mean, it can't be. I mean, you wouldn't do it, but you can definitely, just with Ignition's security levels that you can do, which is all the way down to you can secure the tags, and if you secure it at the tag level, if you make a mistake and put it on a screen that can go onto a public or view-only node, it won't let them see it anyway, because the tag level security will overlay it so they cannot see it or use it. So yes, I think you could even do it purely cloud, but you could set up the security to have safe local control and public viewing in the same application.
Thanks, Jack. As we're sort of winding down a little bit with our time, in the discussions we did when we were sort of going over the dry run for this webinar, you got involved in a little discussion that will take your 40 years experience in this industry to task here. There's with many organizations sort of moving to the cloud, do you see any kind of a shift in how companies are doing business in the sense of, does it remind you of other shifts in business technologies in the past? And any comment on moving too fast or too late to these kind of shifts that you've seen? Is the cloud another major shift compared to some other ones? And where do you see this from your perspective?
Sure. I think some of what we talked about ties into a lot of the things we've talked about. But when I started doing control systems, they were hardwired systems, which meant when you pushed the push button, you got the light saying the motor started almost instantly. And when we started going to DCSs and these PLC, PC systems, some of the early DCSs, the response times were 10 seconds from the time you punched the button till the time you got the feedback back. It was 10 seconds, and that's nerve-wracking when you're running a process. Well, as our hardware and software improved, I finally got to the point, and it's probably 8 years ago, where an operator told me that the thing was updating too fast. He had analog readings coming in, and they were changing a couple times a second, and he said he couldn't see what they were. So that was an amazing shift to go from the 10 seconds to too fast. And anyway, so that's one of the transitions. Just our PCs that we use have expanded so much. The cloud is just the next step, and it's going to improve. And it's inevitable. You're going to be in the cloud. You probably already are in the cloud. Like you said, if you're ordering stuff on Amazon, you're in the cloud. But to apply it to this stuff, I think that it's wrong to wait too long, usually, and I tend to jump in real early, figuring that we need to find out how this works so we can apply it to our customers.
Sure. Jack, I just want to say thank you as we're sort of winding down here for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us and respond to questions. I truly appreciate your time, and so thank you for that. I'm going to give Travis one last chance here because I want to take one final question. Travis, as you look at major advantages that Ignition may have over software as a service, SCADA services, Ignition gives you power to set up a system the way you want. Can you sort of wrap this from your perspective?
Yeah, yeah, we talked about a lot of benefits and risks of the cloud, and it is still a very exciting time with the cloud. There are a lot of fun things you can do with it. Now, the nice thing about Ignition is it is very, very flexible. The architecture of Ignition, it can be changed in so many different ways. We talked about just a few of them here, where you can have your entire SCADA system in the cloud, or you can have a hybrid approach where you have Ignition at a local site that pushes data up to the cloud. And when you think about Ignition, there's lots of different architectures that are possible. And that's what's, I think, really exciting about it. And as we go forward, there's more and more stuff that you can do with Ignition. If you want to start putting systems other than just HMI SCADA systems, you want to put like inventory control, or you want to put some accounting, not accounting, but some of these other different kinds of systems up in the cloud, you can, because Ignition is pretty flexible and works with different databases and whatnot. So I think what you should do, if you haven't really seen a lot about Ignition, you'd want to look at getting a demo of it and seeing the possibilities of different architectures that are possible, because what's nice about it is it can be used right now in the cloud. It can be used in both these scenarios that we talked about. So keep that in mind.
Travis, thanks. And I just want to say in closing that I hope we were able to give you some different perspectives of risk, benefits, advantages on sort of the evolution of the cloud. Please do go to our site and download it and read the white paper, give us your feedback. As you do know, our whole perspective here at Inductive Automation is to be of service to you. So the names of Jim Miser, Vanessa Garcia, Myron Hertling, Shane Miller have been on the screen doing our Q&A session. Please take advantage of them. We will get to as many of these additional questions. We're just going to get to all of them, but thank you for your participation. As we possibly can and type in some answers, if you hang around for a few minutes, we'll get to as many of those as we can. But if you haven't got an answer to your question, then contact Jim, Vanessa, Myron, or Shane, and see what value we can be to you as you look at the transition, as you look at a hybrid, as you look at what belongs or doesn't belong on the cloud from your perspective. We really just want to be a partner with you in going through that process and be a participant in your in contributing to your success. So with that, we've come to the end of our hour. Thanks so much for joining us. We are now concluded, and have a good day.